Good evening to all of you, and we will begin officially our second meeting in May. Thank you all for being here tonight. I know several of you are here for specific purposes that we will introduce in just a few minutes. So we'll start our meeting as we usually do by asking our town clerk to call the roll.
Mayor Marshburn,
I'm present.
Mayor Pro Tem Vance,
Here.
Councilmember Behringer,
Here.
Councilmember Singleton,
Here.
Councilmember Dellinger,
Here.
and Councilmember Matthews.
Here.
Okay, thank you, council members, for all being here and present this evening. I'm going to ask Councilmember Behringer if she will lead us in our Pledge of Allegiance, and she'll also introduce us, our guests for the invocation.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You may be seated.
Mr. Mayor, I've invited Pastor Brian Crumpler from Hayes Chapel Christian Church to come and deliver the invocation this evening.
Thank you, sir, and welcome to our meeting.
Thank you. I'm Pastor Brian Crumpler, Hayes Chapel Christian Church. We have been a part of Garner since 1859 and celebrating 164 years. Enjoying being a part of this community and being a part of all that's done here in Garner.
Great.
Let's open with the word of
Sure.
prayer. Father, thank you for this time that we have to come to do business. Thank you for these, our elected officials that have chosen to take the responsibility upon their shoulders to make decisions to help our community. We thank you for your blessings to us. We thank you how you have so blessed our town, blessed our community. We pray for continued blessing. We pray that you would just help us. And Father, we now ask that this business that is done would be to your honor and to your glory and to the betterment of our town. Thank you for all that we have. Thank you for you continue to lead us. And we have been promised that when wisdom is sought, it will be given. And we need wisdom. We need leadership. And pray for also our those that help and support our firemen and women, our policemen and women. Thank you for them and their service to our community. And we pray that you would just bless this time. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
Reverend, before you leave, we oftentimes give persons in your status an opportunity to. You gave us a brief history of the church, which is pretty fascinating, but if there are any other ministries or activities you want to just mention briefly, we'd be happy to hear from you.
Well, we have regular services on Sunday, and we also have community outreaches, and we are really enjoying the different things going on downtown in Garner because we're right across the street, so all that is a blessing, and we have a lot of work with young people, and groups are at risk, and we just enjoy having people being a part of our services.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you for your ministry. We wish you well. Okay, the next section is what we call petitions and comments, and this is a time when members of the public are invited, if they care to petition the council. This would be on items that are not already on the agenda. So we usually prefer if you would sign up with the clerk, but if you don't, we'll work around that. Madam Clerk, were there any persons to sign up this evening?
No, sir.
Okay. So I will ask the audience in general, is there anyone out there who came for the specific purpose of desiring to petition the council on an issue or to make an announcement?
Mr. Mayor, I know we've got scouts out there. We sure would find out what troop they are and recognize them. Would be
Okay,
good.
well, I'm going to do that in just a minute,
Okay.
but I believe these gentlemen back here, was it your intention to make a public invitation? Yes. You can do that now, would be good. Just give us your name, if you will.
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
Mayor and Council, my name is Martin Pathbridge. I live at 2705 Dunhaven Drive, and I'm here today representing Garner Grows Community Garden. Back in July 2022, the town kindly extended a lease to Garner Grows at Thompson Road Park. Since July, we've made considerable progress, and the site is now looking more like a community garden. To celebrate our progress, I'm here today to invite you to our grand opening. It'll be on Saturday, June the 3rd at 3 p.m. We will start the event with a welcome speech from one of our leaders and anyone from the town who might want to say a few words. We're planning activities such as booths for all age groups, a self-guided garden tour, games and crafts, and hopefully a couple of food trucks. We hope to see you there, so please mark your calendars for June the 3rd at 3 o'clock. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Sounds like a festive occasion, and I hope to get there. Yeah, be there. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, the next item of business, council, before us is to the adoption of the agenda. You have it before you there. What is your pleasure?
Move to accept the agenda.
Okay, second by Mr. Singleton. Okay. If there are no questions about the agenda, I will ask you if you favor adoption of the agenda, please vote aye.
Aye.
If there's any opposition, you can vote no, and there is none. All right, that will guide our meeting this evening. All right, the next part of our agenda is always a very informative and important time, so I'm going to leave my presiding seat here and go down over here and introduce the first presentation for this evening, having to do with a person who is our Wake County Public School System Teacher of the Year, and I have something I want to share with him, so I'll come down there. Mr. Henning, you can come over to the podium here if you'd like to, sir. Let me just say, I had the privilege of meeting Mr. Hennings, I guess it was last week, or was it earlier this week? Last week, I guess, yeah. And so I had a chance to chat with him a few minutes. He's a delightful individual, and as we'll try to share with you this evening, our town very much is proud of his accomplishments, and we want to honor you this evening with his proclamation. So let me read it at this time. Whereas Mr. Terry Hennings has been a dedicated and highly respected civic literacy and African American studies teacher at Garner Magnet High School for grades 9 through 12 since July 2017, and whereas Mr. Hennings chose the challenging and rewarding second career following 25 years of service in our nation's Air Force, and whereas Mr. Hennings strives as an educator to create a classroom environment in which students feel welcome, safe, and at ease, and in which they can strengthen their confidence and communication skills. And whereas Mr. Henning serves on the Wake County Public School System Superintendent Teachers Advisory Council and as Garner Magnet High School's Black Student Union Club Advisor. And whereas Mr. Hennings also serves on Garner Magnet's equity team and as a civic literacy professional learning community leader. And whereas Mr. Hennings' diligence and dedication has been widely recognized by his students, peers, and most recently by the Wake County Public School System. Now therefore, I, Ken Marshburn, Mayor of the town of Garner, do hereby proclaim May 16, 2023 as a day to celebrate Mr. Terry Hennings for being named the 2023 Wake County Public School System Teacher of the Year. And I do this to urge all of our residences, businesses, and civic organizations to take every opportunity possible to support our educators and schools throughout Garner. And our seal is assigned there too. And sir, I will present that to you now. I want to recognize your principal. Where is he? Right over here. If he'd like to come up and say a few words, and then after him, we'll invite you to speak to us as well. This is Mr. Matt?
Yes, sir. Matt Price.
Matt Price, excuse me, okay. The
Yes, sir.
podium's yours, sir.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for letting me go first. I feel like I've spent the last few weeks following Terry at events like this, and that's not easy. But one thing I said about Terry the day after he was named and we had the big celebration at school that just continues to ring true, and I hope that it passes on to our young folks and adults in the community, is that this is a man that lives the words that he says. Lots of people are very good at saying the words. Everybody knows the words you're supposed to say when you're supposed to say it, but I've never I don't think I've ever met a person that day in and day out consistently lives the words that he says, and that means a lot to me. I could not be more proud. I realized today, looking at my calendar, that today marks exactly 1 day since I've been in the seat as the principal of Garner High School, and what a wonderful day to, what a wonderful way to end that first year, being able to bring the Teacher of the Year for the entire district, that's over 300 schools, I believe, back to Garner. And it just means so much, and it could not have gone to a more deserving candidate, more deserving person than, and more deserving man than Mr. Henning. So I'm going to step out of the way and let you talk because you're a lot more profound than me, but thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Sure, yeah, if you will.
Good evening. First of all, I want to thank the mayor and the council for this proclamation. I am deeply, deeply honored. While I have been selected as the Wake County Public Schools Teacher of the Year, I'm also honored to be the Garner Magnet High School Teacher of the Year. And I look forward to representing Garner Magnet High School and representing the city of Garner as I travel around the county to speak. So once again, thank you all so much for this proclamation.
And I believe public recognition would be proper. We need just a few minutes to get some pictures, so indulge us while we meet up here, I guess. Okay, our next presentation, let me find my place here, is a recognition of National Public Works Week, which is a week of May 21 through 27. And I'm going to ask Councilmember Grace Singleton to read that proclamation and ask our park, why don't you do that? And ask our director of that department to come across over there, be recognized.
Whereas public work service provided in our community are an integral part of our citizens' everyday lives, and whereas the support of an understanding and informed citizenry is vital to the efficient operation of public work systems and programs such as water, sewers, streets, public buildings, solid waste collection, snow removal, and whereas the health, safety, and comfort of this community greatly depend on these facilities and services, and whereas the quality and effectiveness of these facilities, as well as their planning, designing, and construction, are vitally dependent upon the efforts and skill of public works personnel, whereas the efficiency of the qualified and dedicated personnel who staff public works departments is materially influenced by the people's attitude and understanding of the importance of the work they perform. Now, therefore, Ken Marshburn, the Mayor of Garner, does hereby proclaim the week of May 21 through May 27, 2023 as National Public Works Week in the town of Garner, and he calls upon all citizens and civic organizations to acquaint themselves with the issues involved in providing our public works services and to recognize the contributions which the public works officials make every day to our health, safety, comfort, and quality of life. And Mr. Forrest Jones is here, who is our Public Works Director. And I'll say real quick to follow up, I don't think people realize that the work y'all do, all our facilities, town hall, police station, GPAC, all the parks, you maintain the buildings, you maintain the grounds, y'all cut right-of-ways, you cut grass on streets, you keep our sidewalks efficient. When we have snow, y'all are on call 24 hours a day, keeping the streets safe for us. So thank you, Forrest, for what you and your team do.
So thank you, Councilmember Singleton, for that proclamation, Mayor and Council. It's good to be before you this evening representing our Public Works Department. I'm honored to serve as our director, and we don't take that lightly, the service and confidence that the council gives us and the town gives us, allowing us to serve them each and every day. We're so honored for this opportunity, and thank you for this recognition. I would take one moment and say, next week, in honor of Public Works Week, we'll be doing some activities. We'll have a Public Works Week day. We'll have a rodeo. We'd invite each of you, if you have time, to come out that morning. For around 9 o'clock we'll start, and we'll have lunch around noon. We'll have some variety of activities where folks will be doing some team building and just demonstrating some of their skill, and we hope you'll come out and celebrate with us in that way, and also maybe try your hand at some of these things as well. So we certainly look forward to that, and it's always a pleasure, and thank you very much.
Hey, thank you, sir. Another round of applause. I think
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to get out of the picture so you can be. Okay, and our third and final presentation for this evening is the proclamation noting the recognition of National Police Week, and our Mayor Pro Tem, Mr. Elmo Vance, is going to lead us in that. Thank you, Mr. Vance.
Wait for Chief to come. Proclamation, Peace Officers Memorial Day Police Week in Garner. Whereas the Congress and the President of the United States, through Public Law 87726, signed by President John F. Kennedy in 1962, proclaimed May 15th as National Peace Officers Memorial Day, and the calendar week in which May 15th falls as National Police Week. And whereas Public Law 103-322, signed by President William Clinton in 1994, directs the flag of the United States of all government buildings be displayed at half-staff on May 15th of each year. And whereas the members of the Garner Police Department play an essential role in the safeguarding the rights and freedoms of the town of Garner, and whereas it is important that all citizens know and understand the duties, responsibilities, hazards, sacrifices of their law enforcement agencies, and the members of our law enforcement agencies recognize their duty to serve the people by safeguarding life and property, by protecting them against violence and disorder, and by protecting the innocent against deception and the weak against oppression. And whereas the men and women of the Garner Police Department unceasingly provide a vital public service. Now, therefore, I, Ken Marshburn, Mayor of the town of Garner, North Carolina, do call upon all citizens of the town of Garner and upon all patriotic civic educational organizations to observe the week of May 14th through 20th, 2023 as National Police Week with the appropriate ceremonies and observances in which all our people may join in commemorating law enforcement officers past, present, who by their faithful and loyal devotion to their responsibilities have rendered a dedicated service to their communities, and in so doing have established for themselves an invaluable and enduring reputation for preserving the rights and security of all citizens. Further, I call upon all citizens of Ghana to observe May 15th, 2023 as Peace Officers Memorial Day in honor of those law enforcement officers who through their courageous deeds and have made the ultimate sacrifice in the service to their community or have become disabled in the performance of duty. And let us recognize and pay respect to the survivors of our fallen soldiers. Signed, Ken Marshburn, Mayor. I would just like to say a few words in reference to your service and to the service of the men and women who are in uniform. Chief Smith, I would say that you are supported by myself and the town when it comes to what you all have done. And I understand, and I've seen you all in action when it comes to protecting the town of Garner, doing things that we may not even see happening. You are diverting crimes from happening. You're protecting our properties and protecting us and on rapid response. And it's greatly appreciated.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vance.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Chief.
Mayor, members of council, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Vance, for the proclamation. I do want to give a shout out to Forrest Jones, our Public Works Director. If you guys haven't seen the town hall at night, they lit it up blue for us this week, and that just, it's pretty amazing. And I'm very thankful for the partnerships that we have within town, that we work really well together. But thank you all. We have a tough job. And it is an honor and a privilege for me to be the chief at this police department, because I know our community supports us, and we know that we have your support, and that means a lot. So thank you very much for the proclamation. I appreciate it.
Okay, another round of applause.
Mr. Mayor. Light, so thanks, Chief Smith, but we're also going to light up the building orange next week for Public Works Week. And since no other department can do it, we're going to ask Public Works to do the work. So we appreciate that.
Okay, so we'll look for the color orange next week, right?
Right.
Good. Outstanding. Thank you all for taking time out to be here this evening. Appreciate all that you do, absolutely. Okay, we'll now move to the rest of our agenda, and the next item will be the consent agenda. There are, by my count, 11 items on the consent agenda. I believe council is familiar with all of those. Unless a council member desires to have an item moved from the consent agenda, I'll ask for a motion for approval.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion properly made and seconded. If you favor approving consent agenda, would you vote aye?
Aye.
Aye.
And if there's opposition, no, and there is none.
Scouts.
Yeah, before we get all the way away from our presentations, we always like to recognize some special persons who occasionally come to our meetings. And we see some scouts sitting right out here. So would invite, is this your troop leader, who would maybe come up to the podium and just tell us what troop you're with and anything you care to share briefly about your scouting activities. Welcome.
I am Matthew Lang. I'm here with Troop 391. We're right across the street here at Garner United Methodist Church. The scouts that are with me, and we have a few that are watching online, they're doing a merit badge called Citizenship and Community. Basically, it's understanding a little bit of the history of Garner, how our town works, how you guys work. They participated in some things such as mini budget sessions, some things like that along the way. They're just trying to get a grasp of the citizenship that we do, not only at a national level through voting and stuff like that, but what you guys do on a day-to-day basis here for us. So they're here, they're taking notes, they're going to write a little report afterwards, bring it back to their merit badge counselor. This is one of the merit badges that they have to receive Eagle, so it's a very important one for them along the way. So we have 3 here with us, and I think we have 3 online according to the text messages. So. All right.
Thank you very much. I'd be pleased if you can do it to bring the mayor a copy of the report and let me look it over. I don't know if you're allowed
Absolutely.
to do that.
I'll make sure you get a copy.
Okay, good.
All righty.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Scouts, I admire your organization and have had the privilege of going to several Eagle Scout, Eagle, what is it's called when you get your Eagle Award, I guess. Court of Honor, excuse me, that's the term I was looking for, I couldn't remember. But thank you all for being here, so stick around as long as you can. Okay, we're going to now move to the section of our agenda under public hearings, and we have actually 2 this evening, but for the first one, the public hearing will be for the FY 24 budget, And I'm going to recognize Ms. Sarah Warren, our budget manager, and officially open the public hearing with your presentation, Ms. Warren.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So this is our second public hearing for the FY24 recommended budget. As a reminder, the recommended budget is $59.9 million, reflecting a 13% increase over the FY23 amended budget. This includes a 5.5-cent tax increase, 2 of which is to support our 2021 bond program, 1.5 cents for the opening of Fire Station 5, and 2 cents for additional FTEs. We've also utilized approximately $1.5 million in ARP dollars and $2 million in our revenue savings plan dollars to help balance the budget for FY24. When we think about the investments for our future, we've invested $3.6 million annually to implement pay in class. This would be effective September 25th and included in employees' paychecks on October 13th. We have recommended pausing merit in FY24 to help fund this investment, which will also allow us to reimagine a new performance program in FY25. We've added 9 FTEs in HR, finance, legal, police, and custodial services. And we've also added battalion chiefs for fire that will be cost shared with the county. As a follow-up to the budget work session on May 11th, there was a request to propose a pay increase in lieu of pausing merit. Upon evaluation, we are proposing a 2% increase in pay for a half a year, which would total $260,000. This would be effective in January of 2024, and it would require a tax increase of 0.5 cent to cover that increase. This would mean that the proposed tax increase would go from 5.5 cents to 6 cents, with a total tax rate of 61.21 cents. And just the graphic on the side would show it shows the proposed increases, starting with September and implementing pay in class, November with a holiday bonus that's currently provided to employees, a 2% adjustment in January, and then October 2024 was when we would introduce the new merit system. And just kind of to see how that might impact our multi-year model. So this shows a tax rate increase of 6 cents. It would still be required to have a tax increase next year with our conservative estimates on reval and in subsequent years based upon the growth that we're seeing. So just a reminder of where we are. We are currently at this May 16th second budget hearing. I have added the May 30th work session to this if there's some necessary follow-up that we need to discuss at that time. But other than that, we are nearing the end of our scheduled dates for the budget process.
Okay, are you ready for questions or comments from council?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Warren, and appreciate the work that you and the committee did on this. Very involved and a lot of changes in this year's budget, I would say. So I'm going to start to my right. I'll ask Mr. Vance, Mayor Pro Tem, if he has any questions or comments.
I don't have any specific questions at this time. I would just echo what the mayor has said, and thank you so much for your hard work. I know it was a team effort, and this is a significant budget that we have coming up for this FY 2024. And again, thank you for the team effort and all that was put in and what was provided to us. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor, at this moment.
Okay, thank you, sir. And I'll go to Mr. Dellinger.
Yeah, thanks for all the hard work coming into your first round of this. It's a process improvement for sure. I just have one question and comment. Thank you for the information this afternoon on the unfunded stuff and getting those updates. I did have one question about the flock operating system that was rated highly but was still remained unfunded. I didn't know if Chief wanted to speak as to what that was, the real-time crime center.
The flock operating system is an addition to the flock cameras, the license plate readers that we currently have. And it's just a small scale version for us to do a real-time crime center on a smaller scale. Because we have the current flock ALPRs, it all ties in together. It would allow us to tie in camera systems through the license plate readers, also through static cameras throughout town, also ring doorbells. It's a central point that allows us to pull in a lot of information in one local point. It helps us work smarter.
Yep.
I just wanted to thank the budget team for the work that they've done. I know this was uncharted waters and a lot of things have changed in a short period of time, so appreciate the hard work and the effort that you put into it.
Okay, Mr. Singleton?
Yes, I appreciate the information I provided us in the budget, additional information that it was good to see the sheet that you gave us on what a penny raises in all the towns in Wake County is, of course, eye-opening. We knew that beforehand, but seeing them all there is it goes back to having older housing stock, as we've discussed. So that information is appreciated. Appreciate the consideration, as we asked last week. Since merit and any pay adjustment were going to be paused for 24 budget, that the consideration was given for the 2% adjustment. And reading what other towns are doing, that's becoming in this area, that's becoming, everyone's continuing merit and COLAs or whatever we want to call them are happening. So appreciate the time and effort that's been put in on this so far.
Okay, and Mr. Matthews?
Echo what everybody said. We had a great work session and all day, and had everything presented to us. And like I said in the past, running a town is a very big business, and we're growing, and we're right at 35,000. So the folks out there need to realize that we're funding fire positions, police positions, giving our employees a badly needed pay increase, so we'll be equal to or hopefully better than some of the other towns, because we don't want to be losing great, valuable employees. And I think you guys most certainly have come up with a great program for that, and appreciate those last minute changes. We were looking at a couple items to make things right, and you all have dealt with it, and look forward to making this thing happen. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you, Ms. Warren. You might hang around close, but since it is a public hearing, I'm going to ask if there are members of the public who came this evening and desire to speak to the council about the budget. Are there any persons here? Yeah, Mr. Whaley, I believe. Probably right up here if you want to. Well, yeah, that'll be good. Just give us your name and address, sir.
Rex Whaley, 102 Pineway Street. I was here last year when we went through the budget. And Mayor and council members, I appreciate the opportunity to make a few comments. I hadn't planned to come this year after last year. I said I understand what the town's up against in a lot of areas. But when the budget came out, I did have a few issues or questions. I know there was a financial presentation prior to the budget actually coming out. And I think one comment I heard was sobering, the needs that are out there and sort of where we are financially with trying to do those. I saw the 5.5-cent increase. And one question I had, I think it was just answered with this revised presentation. I knew we were doing a 1.5 cent for the firefighters. and then I think 2 cents for the new positions. I wasn't sure what the other two, but see now we're seeing it's for the bond. And I guess one comment I would have, I think last year when we were here talking, we did 2 cents for the bond. And in the referendum, that's what it was, 2 cents. And then the savings plan would pick up the rest. So I'm just kind of curious how that's working. So are we now saying it's 4 cents plus whatever the savings plan is going to pick up? That it's not 2 cents, that was, I guess, kind of talked about before the bond issue was voted on.
Okay, did you want to come in, or council member?
One of those, Mr. Twain, you raised very good points, is the cost of what was in the bonds. The fire station 5 is a good example. It started off, our part was going to be 3.5, 4.5 million, went to 6.5. Now our part's 8.5 million, and the bond approval was 6.5 million. So we got to come up with roughly $2 million. One of the projects is continuing to widen Jones Sausage Road from where Amazon is down to and through Garner Road. And that project started at $4 or $5 million. The scope was increased 10 million, 12 million, 16. Now it's at $20 million, unfortunately. Don't know if that project will even get done because it's so expensive. But that's part of it, is the cost of some of the bond projects have just escalated so high. And it's not just in Garner. In our package last week, other towns are experiencing some of the same increases. So it's a pretty sobering numbers. You use the word sobering, yes. It's an attention getter.
Yeah, and I know we talk about the bond approval, and it's turning out that it's costing a lot more than what it was advertised to be. So I just wonder how that would have impacted some of the votes. Not from a standpoint that those aren't needed, but, we got a lot of, from my view, looking at it, there's a lot of competition for the dollars that are available, and a lot of operational needs. And like you said, we've gone from the Jones Sausage Road, 4 million to 20 million. That I just wonder on some projects, do we consider, well, maybe it's just not the time. Maybe that 20 million should be spent on some other streets that we can get done. Same thing with Yergin Park. I know 20 million, and we've had to shuffle some of the park money around. And I understand there's park facilities that need renovations and repairs. So I guess that's where I come from as a resident, is no matter what we do, there's never enough money. And so maybe some priority shifting of what we're going to fund needs to take place. So that was one comment, and like I said, a question I had. And then I know we normally show the cost of what the tax increase will be, and I didn't see that in there this year. But I'm guessing it's going to be around, down with 6 cents, probably like $180 for the average taxpayer. That's following what we did last year. And one reason I bring that up, we talk a lot about that chart where we show the cost of services. And it seems to change every few years. If you go back and look how we calculate it, one time it was Garner Homes values, then it was Raleigh Home value. Then we started changing it to values of each town, and now we're including county property taxes in there. So it's, I've never felt that was a very good indicator to use when you're looking at the effective tax rate. And one thing I wanted to come down specifically and say tonight to the council, that's fine and dandy. We can look at property values. You can make the argument, well, maybe Wake County, I hope not, could look at it and say, well, do the same thing. Well, Garner, your tax values are lower, so we're going to come up with a variable tax rate for the county, and we're going to charge y'all more. Holly Springs, your values are high, we're going to charge you less. So to me, that tax value, it's kind of, we kind of lean on it to justify. What I wanted to mention tonight specifically, if you look at median household income for the communities in Wake County, Garner is the third lowest. We're at like $70,000. You got I can't remember now, I wrote it down on one of my other sheets. It's like Holly Springs or Morrisville, one was like 123. Cary's like 100 and something thousand. So if you look at the tax burden based on median household income, we're probably the third highest in the county. And I can kind of shrug it off and say, well, yeah, last year, this year. But there are a lot of folks who in this town, these increases are adding up, and it's going to be a drain on them. And then I look and I see, we funded a lot of good things. I understand that, but I saw we didn't fund a couple of police officers. And I think I saw a presentation from the fire chief recently where we're probably going to have the need for some substations. So that's what I'm saying. I just think we need to start looking at maybe shifting some of our priorities. I'm concerned when I see we're going to fund the pay plan, that's probably next year going to be $4 million with some one-time money. That's going to hit next year. And I know we're talking like 6 cents next year, 7 cents. So it's just very worrisome to me the burden that we're putting on our residents, regardless of what the property values are. Because just as our values don't compete with these surrounding communities, our income doesn't compete with those surrounding communities. And I don't know what the answer is. I know it's a struggle between what you need to do and what's available. So that was a good part of what I wanted to say. And I guess the other thing I would want to mention, and I know nobody wants to hear it, I think we need to take a hard look at this revenue savings plan. And I understand the concept and the cash flows, and in my mind, it's not a savings plan. It is a debt. I think even on some of the financial presentations, it's called a debt model. We're not saving money. It's got, I don't know how much the liability is. I think for the 21 bonds, we're probably looking at $80 or $90 million. That's got to go in that fund just to pay that. And then I know we talk about town hall and parking deck and these transfers we're doing, now from the operating, because it's sucking money out of the diverting money out of the operating fund. And now we're talking about, well, let's transfer some expenses over to the revenue plan to free up money in operating. So why are we transferring it to start with? I think it started out as a very good concept, but I think it doesn't work as well as it was planned, because I think in one financial presentation I saw where it was stated that it was performing better than anticipated, but it's taken so much money from operating fund that it's contributing a lot to these tax increases that we're seeing. And I think it would be better for these capital projects to just have an up and up bond vote, go to the residents, say, here's what we need, than kind of doing this roundabout through this revenue savings plan. Because I see now, well, there was a presentation where I think it was going to be at a zero balance in 2010, and I think in this budget document it's showing a deficit in 2030. I'm sorry, and in this budget document I think it's showing a negative balance in 2028. So there was a presentation about, well, maybe we need tax increases now to fund to bring it back solvent. So we just created another fund over here for us to try to have to fund. So it just seems very scattered, and it's hard to really get a handle on it. So that was the main thing. And like I said, I appreciate your time and allowing me to come down and make those comments. And I don't envy the job y'all have to do, but I just ask that you consider the average resident in Garner. And like I said, keep in mind that 70,000 income and not look so much about the tax value. I understand what you're saying, like Cary, a penny's $3 million, and in Garner it's 500,000. But I look, Cary's population is like 128,000, and I think their assessed value is like 35 billion, like 5 or 6 times what ours is. So it's not just necessarily the value of like a house versus a house; it's also the quantity of what they have compared to Garner. So anyway, I appreciate the time, and I wish y'all well in what y'all decide to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Whaley. I do remember you coming last year. Appreciate you taking the time to come out and share your thoughts. Council, any members care to comment on these specifics, or I'll give you a minute to do that if anybody wants to. Okay.
Mr. Willie raises some good points that we discussed at our budget session last week. Some of the same points that you brought up, we talked about. It's
Glad you mentioned the work work session. I did want to attend. I think it's open to the public, isn't it?
Yes.
But it was scheduled for all day, and I'd already had a webinar to attend, and I think you're doing one on the 30th. Because I did want to hear those details, because it is very hard to even try to make some of these comments just based on what I can see in a budget document without hearing some of the nuts and bolts. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, sir. Was there anyone else who cared to make comments at this time?
I just want to thank him for paying attention and making a lot of astute observations about the budget and the challenges. On the revenue savings, you're right. It's sort of a blessing and a curse. I think for me in particular, you mentioned all the capital needs coming, and we've got to pay for those when those come. So I think there's a general consensus that there'll need to be another bond issue later in the decade. So then the question is, how are we going to pay for that on top of what's still outstanding from the bonds we're going to issue in the next few years? And I think you're right. The original purpose of the revenue savings program was to impose some discipline on the budgeting process and capital improvements. And I think the rapid growth has sort of changed the model a little bit on how much is going in. So it is a tough decision. The money's got to come from somewhere. And it's either tax increases or we squirrel it away for future capital improvements as we grow. So, but thank you for coming and your comments. Appreciate it.
Okay, any other council members? All right, since there's no one else here that from the public who desires to comment, I guess I can close this hearing, even though, do I state correctly that the portal online is will still be available for people to comment? How long will that be?
So we proposed at the work session to keep it open through Memorial Day weekend. If there's going to be further discussion, we're happy to extend that to June 2nd, which would be that Friday of that following week, and provide that feedback to you.
Okay. All right.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to recommend we find the money for the real-time crime center. I think it offers a lot of efficiencies to the department and uses existing technology. I just make that recommendation to the council.
Okay.
Mr. Dillinger, do you remember the specific amount? I can't remember right now.
35,000. And I believe that's is that a recurring expense or is it a one-time?
Yes, I think that's a recurring expense. I think that's a subscription-based service.
Okay. So I guess I can close this portion of the public hearing if everybody has spoken, and I'm going to do that at this point in time, and we'll come back. This public hearing is closed, and we'll come back to the next appointed time that we have for this, and members of the public can still come in and make comment. Okay. Thank you very much. And thank you again, Mr. Weathy, for taking your time. All right, the next item under public hearing is the Garner Forward Comprehensive Plan, which many of you are familiar with. I'm going to recognize Mr. Matt Noonkester, who is, well, I'll recognize Jeff, and then he can recognize who he wants to. Thank you, Mr. Triesenberg.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. Yes, Matt Noonkester from City Explained, our lead on the contract for the update to the Garner Forward Comprehensive Plan, is here to provide a summary presentation. We recognize that some people may be still hearing about this for the first time. So he has prepared to go over, not in too great a length, but to give a fairly comprehensive review of the process and findings for this plan. So without further ado, I'll invite him up here and get the PowerPoint started.
Welcome back, sir. Look forward to hearing from you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Jeff. Mr. Mayor, members of council, thank you again for your time this evening to talk about the new Garner Forward Comprehensive Plan. As was mentioned under the umbrella of the official public hearing, I did want to give a more in-depth overview of the planning process, the products that were created, and where we go from here, just so we have it in the record and anybody who is new to the process can jump in and catch up to what we've been doing for over a year now. So I do have some slides. I am going to go through them pretty quickly. But if you either want to stop me in the presentation or hold your questions, I defer to how you want to run business, but I'm ready either way. Okay. So for this evening, I want to hit 4 key components if I can. One is just some project background. Why did we do this project in the first place? Talk about the planning process a little bit, as well as the plan document that resulted from the planning process, and then some of the key findings and recommendations that I felt as the consultant were kind of new or interesting compared to your previous plan, and then I'm sure you would add on to that list as well during the discussion. So first, just some project background. I start from the beginning. Again, I told you this was a comprehensive review, and so going back to the request for qualifications that was born out of 2 town council retreats now, there was a desire to update the Garner Forward Comprehensive Plan. Not replace it, but at that time it was to expand upon some of the ideas with an influence and a focus a lot on land use and character. And so that was really what was driving things, and then also stitching back together all the other plans that had been reviewed or approved since the Garner Forward original plan was adopted, to just make sure everything was working and moving in the same direction. So that's kind of what we took as our initial charge going forward. And again, as I was mentioning, we approached this project as an update. This was not a replacement because things were not working. This was that times have been changing. Attitudes or areas of emphasis have changed. Opportunities had changed. And so we really treated this as an update originally and what we could do to add on to the existing Garner Forward plan that you had. However, as we went through the process, what we found out was that if we kept it as a library of plans, that there could be some misinterpretation or misalignment. And so as we come forward to you with the draft document, we did go ahead and reformat and are bringing forward to you an entirely updated Garner Forward Comprehensive Plan versus just a chapter that stands alone that you would have to reference and those kind of things. So we did put it all under one umbrella. But as you can see from the slide here, we built upon what was already done prior to in 2018 and are really just kind of either polishing up or extending forward some of the ideas that have been talked about since then. So in terms of our process, this is a slide that we've used often during the plan development, which was trying to find these 3 really areas of emphasis or focus. One was community input through the engagement process, doing sound data, collecting sound data and doing thorough analysis, and then best practices or ideas that either we had or maybe folks we talked to within the community had to enlighten us and see if there were maybe better ways to do something or different ways to do something. And where those things could align, where the data supported it, the community was excited about it, and we could find examples from elsewhere where it's worked really well, that was the sweet spot where we tried to write the plan and generate the recommendations for this document. So we did have a comprehensive process as we went through and just working from left to right, the biggest ideas. We started out by just getting our act together and our house in order, created protocols and processes in order to make sure we were efficient. And then we did a lot of data collection. We inventoried that data and evaluated it and completed a lot of analysis. Coming out of that was things like market studies, reviewing your current policies and ordinances, looking at market trends going forward. And we left there with some important planning themes that we wanted to make sure we tackled during this planning process. We then did do some what I call what-if testing. So we basically did not just accept the future that we were on or the path that we were on as the town of Garner, but we challenged ourselves and looked at different ways you may want to grow as well to make sure either 1, you felt good about the path you were on, or 2, what tweaks you might want to make going forward. All that resulted in a framework of recommendations, which included maps, text, and imagery to help guide future decisions as you make them at the dais. Some of those got into a lot of detail, like you see with what we call focus area studies, and I'll go over that concept in more detail. And then again, here we are this evening talking about the documents that have resulted through this planning process. So in terms of community engagement, we tried and had a lofty goal of trying to engage every resident that we could, or every resident that would be interested. We wanted to make time and lend an ear or have a good conversation with, and I think we at least provided the opportunities to do that. We also did a strong literature review. Again, the worst thing we could have done was just ignore everything that got us to this point. So we really started by reviewing what you had now, what was working and what wasn't working, what might have age on it, as we were setting up what we needed to do for this process. We did do a lot of analysis and looked at the math and looked at the region as well as the sub-region and the town for kind of where you were today and where things might be headed in terms of opportunities moving forward and how we could take advantage of those opportunities through land use planning and other recommendations. We also did do our analysis through computer simulation and other tools that were available. And this is one of the project deliverables. So these models are now going to be available to staff if they want to do monitoring or those kind of things. Or if you want to plug into the regional initiatives going on in scenario planning, these tools will now be available to you. If you remember, we did look at 3 different scenarios as part of our process. So we looked at the current Unified Development Ordinance that I think it was July of last year-ish, up to the amendments up to that point. We looked at where your previous Garner Forward plan was, and then we looked at some of the ideas that were generated through our planning process, and we were able to compare and contrast those impacts and evaluate the trade-offs from those different futures. We also then took that as demand, so where growth might go and how much of it. We looked at how we would support that through infrastructure enhancements and capacity enhancements, and so we have a complete package on that. And then I was excited that another project sort of became a companion initiative here called the Cost of Services Study. And that document was done in time that it could inform some of the discussions we had at the town retreat, as well as some of the recommendations that we were making for this plan today. And then again, best practices, this is where the consultant team, as well as staff and elected officials who travel and so on and so forth, all just brought up ideas. What if we tried this? Could we do this? I've seen this done successfully somewhere else. And we brought in a lot of those lessons learned from elsewhere too, to the planning process. So in terms of community engagement, I just want to make sure I take a quick roll call of everything that was done. I can answer questions if you want to go into more depth on kind of the who, what, where, and when things occurred. But we had a project website. We propped it up. And that was a resource that was available 24/7 throughout the planning process if you wanted to get information or see where we were and what was going on. Over the life of the project, we had a little over 1,500 people who had visited. You see from the graph here that it was pretty constant. You know, we had little spikes and little troughs, and then where you see the big spike is when the draft plan was released. So we got a lot of interest there. But we had constant buzz throughout the process on the website. We also completed 26 different interviews, and as part of those interviews, they were conversations with the community or folks who had an interest within the town. This is just a list. It's not a numerical list, so we may have had multiple interviews within the same category, but we met with all the different town departments. We also met with some of the commissions or special interest groups that you have. We met with some of the more regional players like the transportation organization. We met with private developers, large landowners. We also asked local engineers and architects, you know, how was it to work in Garner? What was happening in terms of their mind and when they came to bring a project to Garner? And then interested citizens. We actually did an open call during our 4th round of stakeholder interviews and said if anybody wanted to speak with us, they could. And some people took us up on that offer. And then we had a project steering committee. I don't need to tell you all too much detail about that because you were half of the membership of that committee. But the planning, for those in the audience or watching on TV, the Planning Commission was the other half of that project steering committee. And their charge was to be a sounding board through the entire planning process. And so this group was able to hear ideas mature through the planning process and build on what we had done in meetings previous in order to make sound decisions and recommendations for the document. We had 5 meetings with that committee. We then held what was called a Community Ideas Exchange Workshop. This is what I sort of call blue sky planning, or what I would call maybe a discovery phase, where we were really just listening and we were putting ideas and games and putting people into situations to give us feedback that we knew would be important that we'd have to consider. And again, it was a real hands-on experience that we had over at the Recreation Center. We also created what was called On the Table. That was an initiative where it was like a meeting in a box, and it did not require the consultant or staff or anybody else, but somebody could just take this material and go have a meeting on their own and then send that information back to us. And we did get notes from some of those events. And then we had created 3 subgroups off of the Project Steering Committee. We called these strategic advisory groups. We had one called Plan Ambassadors, and their job was to help us get access to the community and brainstorm ways to do better engagement and more effective engagement within Garner. We had one called Scenario Planning, and I would add likely impacts analysis to that. And that's where we dreamed up those different futures and kind of did the math of what the impacts might be, and were able to evaluate the trade-offs. And then we had one on community character, because we took such a design focus for this project that we wanted to really talk about, like the sense of place and the feeling that comes from being in Garner, and how do we capitalize on that or improve it. And as part of that, that group also helped us on this concept of focus area studies that I'll review for you later in the presentation. When we were finished meeting with that group and we were finished writing the draft plan, we also had a draft plan recommendations workshop, again at the Recreation Center. It was a drop-in event held over multiple hours in the same day, and I thought we had great attendance there. I thought the people who came spent a lot of time at the event. We had a lot of interaction, a lot of good conversation. We actually pulled recommendations out of the draft plan, and where you see those dots that are red and green, people would give us instant reactions to what they thought about those recommendations. And also we had on the table things we liked about certain chapters, things we were fearful about certain chapters, or things we had more questions on. And that input and those fingerprints from the community directly impacted the next iteration of the draft document. Then I was fortunate to be given time on the town board retreat in February. And we were able to present some of these big ideas at the time that were evolving for the plan, as well as the companion cost of service study to kind of get that perspective as well. But that was one more touch point that we had. And then we had the policymaker briefing. So in April of this year, I was able to have a presentation and give a briefing to Planning Commission and hear some of their early thoughts and comments and feedback, as well as getting to meet with you all in April as well for a similar briefing. So then moving from the process creates the document, and if you have a good process, it's easy to have a good document. So I just want to go over some of the highlights of that document now, again, for people in the audience or watching right now who maybe haven't seen it yet. So the document itself actually has 7 chapters in it. You see the table of contents to the left. In terms of the statistics or the stats, you have 257 pages, 92 different recommendations. We tried to balance the text with a lot of graphics because, again, our emphasis on character. So we have 14 pages of maps, 29 pages of different graphics that communicate data and information. We actually did site concept drawings, and there's actually 95 different hand renderings within the document, again, to portray the feeling that we're going for moving forward as a community. So if I just kind of start with some of the highlights from the beginning to the end, the vision statement now is grounded in the Garner strategic plan. And that is one of the ways we tried to connect different planning documents together. So we've revised it to make sure there's a direct connection and correlation to the strategic plan you've approved. When you move into chapter 1, which is the introduction, I just remind everybody that if you're used to thinking of Garner just as the town limits of Garner, this plan expands your thinking. We look at something called the extraterritorial jurisdiction, which is where the town has zoning authority, but is not actually incorporated in those areas, as well as something called the urban services area, which is an area that is it's an agreed upon boundary within Wake County, and all of Wake County is divided up into these so that they bounce into each other and touch each other. But we looked at the Garner urban service area that would bump up against Johnston County, the city of Raleigh's urban service area, Fuquay-Varina's service area, and the like. So our plan is larger than just the town when we make our recommendations and do our analysis. And one of the key parts that, in fact, members of the Planning Commission wanted to make sure I highlighted when we've gone through this process is just the standing of this plan. So this plan is required by state law in order to support your zoning. So your Unified Development Ordinance requires this comprehensive plan in order to have standing and validity. But the state law does stop in terms of adherence to the plan. And they say that it's not subject to judicial review. Some other states within the U.S. would actually have it subject to judicial review, and you could go to court if you didn't follow your plan. That's not the case in North Carolina, and so we've tried to write the document and have a planning process in a place that you almost feel obligated to implement this plan because of the community engagement and the thinking that's gone into it. So it's kind of more of a personal belief in the plan that's going to implement it more than it being something with state law. It was also asked that I mentioned when I had my conversations with the Planning Commission about, well, how do you actually impact change within the community? If we write a document, why do things not happen the way we wanted them to happen? And it's because there's other influences that are going on as well. So whether it's the person who owns the property and what they want to do with it, what the developers want to come and propose, and if they're interested in the things that the government's advocating for, what is the lending community like? We need the money to be lent to a project in order for it to happen. Is there infrastructure available? There's a whole list of things of why stuff comes out of the ground the way it does, or why things are preserved the way they are. And this document, as long as some other things you do as a council, do your part in trying to shape the future. But we do recognize that you don't have absolute authority or control over markets and things of that nature. We did add, and this was a great recommendation coming out of the draft plan recommendations workshop, to add a brief town history. So we've added that in, and I'm excited about it. This is some of the infographics that we talked about, so all the data and the information that ground our recommendations are in the plan as well. And we end chapter 1 with almost a charge to the community as a whole about what they're supposed to do with this document. So we talk about treating it more as a playbook because there are things that we just could not ever anticipate when we were writing this. And so we have kind of the tenets of the plan that allow you some flexibility if an opportunity comes up. Calling it being a championing a plan, it's entirely possible in 257 pages that you don't love everything in it. And that's just the way it is. It's a thick document that goes into a lot of different topics. But we ask that the things that you really do believe in, if you could really get behind them and help implement them, is fantastic. Understanding the elements of time. We talked a lot during the planning process that you have a piece of land, and once that land is developed, sometimes it's hard to get it back and get a redo or do something different. So if there's something you want, be willing to wait for it rather than being satisfied with the short-term gain. Think of the long-term outcomes. And then helping make it happen. So whether it's volunteering or coming to speak or those kind of things, these plans need to be active because the people are active implementing and not because the document's doing it for you. Chapter 2 is what's called the growth framework. I would say this is probably one of the most important chapters of the plan because it really sets up a direction for growth, development, and preservation within Garner. Here you see a screenshot of 2 of the pages where you see 10 guiding principles. There's actually 13. If you look at the page previous, there's 3 on there as well. But these are 13 ideas or concepts or best intentions that the town would have moving forward, that if an opportunity comes up that we didn't anticipate, you would evaluate them against these 13 and see if they're forwarding what are really your truest, most important statements that you make about the community in this context.
Matt, if I could
please
comment on the growth framework for a second, because in reading through it again and kind of trying to create something that's actionable, 13 is a lot.
Yes.
And so I sort of have a recommendation to cut it into 3 themes with the same under them, the same categories under them. And the reason is you want to create the sort of functional framework that invites quantitative measurement by its structure. And that way you can incorporate that into the development process, proposals, and what comes to council, and almost become sort of a rubric for analyzing things, right? Because if you're going to be data-driven, you have to prioritize the information you want, and that drives the data you're gathering. So my recommendation is the 3 categories to be 1, fiscal sustainability and stewardship. And so under that is your right size the community, land use, long-term fiscal stability, and economic vitality. The next category is quality of life. Under that, parks and recreation open space, community facilities and services, and natural environment. And then the last category is smart development and growth, and that's community design, home and neighborhood choices, infill development and redevelopment. And I debated on putting transportation and quality of life there, but transportation would be the last one.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think putting them into three different themes, it's easier to sort of focus in on than 13 big ones. The 13th was the advocacy one, the first one.
Yeah.
But I can send that to you, but it's sort of a proposal for adding more structure because I think it gives a way, again, it's a jumping off point for analyzing big projects as they come in these sort of buckets and walking through developers, through our expectations. And then also there's some directly related data points and data gathering that happens under these different subcategories that can then be transformed into information when we need more quantitative information. So it's my recommendation. I'll send it to you.
Yeah, please do.
Look at.
Please do. I mean, it's logical. And yeah, I mean, with a comprehensive plan, both the blessing and the curse is how broad its scope is, right? So if there are chances to organize it, in the end, I'm all about implementation because the document isn't worth it if it doesn't get what you want for your community. So ideas like that, you know, if the board agree, if the council agrees, I mean, those are easy to do. That's just presentation type stuff. So we can do that. In terms of the first map that's in the growth framework section, there's really three important maps I'm going to go through, and this is the first one of them. And this is called the framework map. And again, this might be one of those parts of the plan that I would advocate that you're more absolute in your commitment to it because it's broad and it's general enough, but it will provide order and organization as you make your decisions. And so as part of this plan, it's got initiatives that come after it. But I'm going to stay on the map here for just a minute to show you ideas like the hatched area that you see. We're advocating to expand your extraterritorial jurisdiction. What happens at NC 540 as it's completed and opened will have a tremendous impact on growth and development opportunities. And we think that the town should have its say in the future of those areas and that you should make a petition immediately to try to expand your extraterritorial jurisdiction for that reason. You also see here activity centers, and there's a hierarchy of them, whether it's regional, community, or neighborhood, and there's a description for each of these. And these are the areas that also kind of anchor or buoy some of the mixed use development that I'm going to talk about here in a minute. And you'll see when I go to the next slide on here, there are some very, I would call it powerful statements about the mixed use activity centers in here. So for example, if you look on the bottom right of my slide, in a regional employment activity center, which these locations were picked deliberately to try to look at where that energy would be and the parcel size and the like. It even says in there, for example, residential uses in an employment activity center should be secondary to commercial and open space. So even here, we're starting to set some expectations about land use mix and the like so that we use those pieces and those parts of the community very wisely and where they're located. So this is already starting to set up some expectations that you would use during a development application review. Then the next part that we have as part of the framework is what I call the character typology. So I've described this to you before as the project steering committee, where these are the different ingredients, and then the map is the recipe that we follow in terms of providing order and predictability to the community. And this would be like looking down flat on a map and just understanding kind of what is generally going on in these different areas. And so we have several categories, which I'll introduce to you here in a minute, but we have this map, which is called the character typology map, that sets expectations for what is the intended development type in these areas. And so as you go through the different categories, we have open space as one of the categories. We have rural living, because of what you have going on in the most southern parts of your urban service area. We have a rural living category. We have neighborhoods, so where people live. We have retail centers where people shop. We have employment centers where people work. And then we have mixed use activity centers, which kind of creates energy and synergy and gravity for all those different uses coming together. And as you go through that process, we're intentionally simple in the plan because there are certain things that we would want to kick over to zoning. We don't want to create things in the plan that contradict zoning or make zoning harder to do and enforce. And so we try to make a hand-in-glove type connection between your Unified Development Ordinance and this new comprehensive plan. And one of the ways we do it is like the matrix that you see here, where we actually tell you which zoning districts would be most appropriate to implement the colors that are on our map. And we can talk during the discussion if you want to talk about some other zoning features that would be most appropriate to implement some of the ideas within this plan. And then the third map that we have here, we call it the Development Change and Intensity Map. So this is now thinking in the third dimension of pulling things up and extruding them up. How intense is that development? How tall is that development? How is parking or open space? How are streets designed? And it gives guidance on those. And again, listening to the community engagement process and the like, we didn't just cram a bunch of tall buildings in your traditional downtown, for example. We took advantage of where the infrastructure was there, whether it's on NC 540, US 70, some of the plans for bus rapid transit and the like, and we strategically put the development intensity that was greatest where we thought the infrastructure would be most available to serve it. Then we have a table that goes with that map, and again, for each of the levels of intensity that we have, we set expectations for development pattern, for prevailing building heights, how large blocks might be, what types of transportation are preferred, and even how streets would be designed, whether they would have a rural, suburban, or rural cross-section to them. And then we follow that up by, again, trying to create these connections back to the Unified Development Ordinance. So this is one where we try to talk about what types of homes should be most present within the different character areas. And then we do the same thing for non-residential buildings. And then we move into, okay, you've talked about how long blocks and things should be, but what should they look like? Like what form should they have? And so based on the different character we're trying to achieve, we'll talk about whether you should have cul-de-sacs or not have cul-de-sacs, how connected your street should be, and then getting into open space. And so I thought there was a real opportunity to try to create a hierarchy of open space as you're making your individual decisions on development applications. How do they work within a larger system? And so we talk about all the different open space elements that would be appropriate in different character areas. Please.
Just a comment. I'd mentioned it when the other draft came through, and you had mentioned the sort of percolating up from the UDO into the comprehensive plan with regards to the building typology.
Yep.
And I think one of my biggest concerns with the draft we have now is we don't really define what mixed use is to us. Mm-hmm. And so when you have single family detached duplex units in these sort of mixed use categories, we haven't delineated, there may be an appropriate use for that within a larger project, but we've not delineated an appropriate proportion of that type of unit or decided to exclude it altogether. Mm-hmm. And so the concern it gives me is it sort of the comprehensive plan then more lends itself to what we've already been doing that wasn't even mentioned in the previous plan, but it almost invites more of the same of what we've been getting without having that sort of definition of mixed use and what our expectations are. And a lot of the illustrations, the conceptual drawings on mixed use, anything in here, there's no single family homes in them. Mm-hmm. But in our matrix here, it's like single family homes. And so do you end up with a mixed use that is a couple of commercial buildings and a bunch of single family homes and townhomes, which is what we've been doing, or do we go to what our neighbors are doing when they do mixed use? It's sort of echoed again on, I guess, page 92, where there are the two definitions of mixed use. There's the verticality mixed use, and then there's a horizontal mixed use. And I think the horizontal mixed use doesn't achieve some of the fiscal goals that we have. And so having a bunch of residential and a one-story residential and one-story commercial, that's mixed use and of we've had projects come before and said, well, the interpretation when this was made was this, and so we're going to go this way. Well, it almost adds more. It mentions mixed use more, but it doesn't define it more.
Yeah.
And so it's a challenge to just accept this until we kind of refine what does a mixed use development in Garner look like, so that we're all on the same page and understanding what that means.
Yeah. The biggest, and I'm speaking for myself now, the biggest enemy of mixed use implementation for me is parcel size and shape, right? Because we designate an intended center, let's just call it that, but it might be divided into 4 or 5 parcels of different ownership. And so part of it is like, if I could combine all 5 parcels, I would have a discernible center here, and I would have within a walking distance, you know, and follow all the principles of mixed use. But then only one parcel comes in for your application. And they say, you know, okay, we want to be part of this larger center, but because we're on the edge, maybe we're more residential because you want the non-residential in the center, but they haven't come in yet, right? So it's like, what I try to do in my plans is not box you in too much. So in a comprehensive plan, I try to set the most stern principles you want to follow, the values you want to follow, and the like. But I would probably recommend, and again, I'm speaking as the consultant here on this, is I would amend your UDO immediately to look at the zoning districts for mixed use and kind of what their requirements are. And the reason I bring that up is because when you look at the irregularity of a parcel or something like that, it's nice to have the additional tools in your belt that the UDO provides, like setback requirements, like landscape requirements, parking requirements, you know, like with ratios and shared parking strategies and the like. So some of it is that like if I was doing both projects at the same time, I'd say, don't worry about what's in here, because in the zoning we'll really kind of get it right. Or, you know, maybe, and again, I'm just dreaming ideas here, but in some communities we work in, they actually have triggers in the zoning ordinance, not in the plan, but in the zoning ordinance. And it'll say, you can build 25% of your residential, but then you really got to put a non-residential building in by that point, you know. But again, that's a zoning issue and really a development approval condition. You could, if we did conditional zoning, is the way you do mixed use, you could say, okay, with those 5 parcels I described, if the one on the edge comes in residential, almost as part of the business you all do, you can say, we're approving this as residential, but we are all acknowledging that the discernible center is this parcel. So then when that parcel comes in, you should say it shouldn't be residential because it's part of a larger area. There are a lot of ideas and kind of best practices we can do, but they're usually in the zoning or development conditions. So part of it is I could create more detail or more precision, even if you want to call it that, in this plan, but you may regret it later because it boxed you in when the zoning really could handle something. But it's a delicate balance. I fully acknowledge that. Like, let's say something came in and it only came in residential, or it put one small building of non-residential and said, I'm mixed use, I'm good. I would probably use first the framework map and say, well, we have these centers here, and in those centers, which I would consider the location and then a 1/4 mile walking shed, it says that non-residential is a predominant use. So don't even come to me with a residential project in that 1/4 mile of the center. And then if you do come in otherwise, you may say, okay, if you're coming in residential, but let's designate you as part of a center. And that center means that you are providing the rooftops for this discernible center. A colleague of mine, David Dixon, who's with Urban Places at Stantec, and I'll misquote his number, but he'll tell me somehow that like for one block of Main Street, you have to have almost like 1,000 people within walking distance to keep that vital and going. And so when I go around and look at like historic Savannah or Charleston or all these other places, what you notice is they don't all have like that single retail floor in every block, but they're all within proximity to each other that it works and everything can be vital. Some projects we've been doing now in Columbia, even in Loudoun County, Virginia, there the housing is so high and in demand and such a good performer that developers are building the first floor retail and just leaving it. They have no intention of filling it. The pro forma works for them because the rents or the price per square foot above it. And so what ends up happening is sometimes more low rent uses come in there that you're not intending in a mixed use walkable center. So there's a lot to think about. And I've just found in my past that at zoning, you can really attack a lot of those things, and especially because it's law versus a recommendation. That I think we should continue to explore, like, you know, what is the right tool and the right time and the sequence to achieve what we all want to achieve. So we should keep talking about that, I think. So just continuing the document tour, Chapter 3 now goes down in scale, and it's really looking at specific traits of community character and land use. And here we focused on 5 different themes that came out of here. We have something called the public realm, which just for definitions is everything in between the buildings and includes the streets and all that kind of stuff. And it's the places that you can start to stitch together all the things that are happening on private property and create a real place in a community. Then we talk about land use mix and different development intensity principles to follow. Then we we strengthened this after the draft plan workshop. Somebody called me out and said, there's not enough about neighborhoods and stuff in here right now. And so we really bolstered that section after the draft plan workshop and actually have a whole new theme on it. Community connections is either transportation or making a really big push that you should connect green space between developments just like you would roads. Continuous green space is much more pleasant than just disjointed and surrounded with a chain link fence and that kind of stuff, but really make it look like it was meant to be. And then natural conservation as well as historic preservation. We wanted to make sure that we gave a nod to that with some of our recommendations. So for each one of the themes, it kind of sets up like this. We do an introduction and give some kind of high-level targets and goals that we would have for that theme in our description. We then have in green text our recommendations. Now, these are the recommendations that staff would be using to evaluate a development application and would give a response to what that might feel like. All the text that's in black under the green recommendation provides context and more detail to hopefully make sure we're clear on what that recommendation is trying to achieve. And you can apply that as you move forward in your deliberations. And then we do have a spotlight for each one of these. This is an important point to make sure you understand. I didn't forget the conversation we had about missing middle and all that stuff last time. But the way we're doing this process is we're taking all the recommendations and we will do one batch edit at the end. So almost like you'll make a resolution to adopt with the following changes, and we'll use that as a punch list and make all those changes for you. So I do acknowledge the conversation that we had last time about this. I did not forget. And then we dove into very specific areas that we called our focus area studies. These were either locations that had an opportunity or were at a crossroads for something, or they were a chance to really emphasize the town's future for economic development, as well as job creation and the like. And we wanted to make sure that we really spoke about some of those areas in the plan. So we have 6 of them. I won't go through them all, but I'll just show you an example of one of them. This is Garner Station coming out of Raleigh on what is a proposed bus rapid transit line. And you can see here we drew sort of how a station might occur and how we might be able to have higher density or intensity because of the transit improvement, as well as the 10 to 12-story buildings coming out of Raleigh. There's a logical transition that comes from your neighbors there, so we thought we could take advantage of that. We then do have imagery that tries to set the expectation again. Sometimes words are useful, but they can be a little bit twisted, so we like to add some imagery to it to try to set the intent. And you see that, you know, we have it in multiple ways. So whether we're looking down, like what do we call bird's eye view, or we're actually looking at what this is called street view, we try to set the right expectation. Chapter 4 is Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Resources. We also acknowledge you already have a master plan doing this, but what we ended up wanting to do in here was just have only these 2 pages. But now when the development application comes to you, by reference, we are referring to the Garner Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Resources Comprehensive Master Plan, and just being very clear that we're giving it the same weight as if it's the comprehensive plan required by state law and its recommendations. So you should feel more confident and coordinated that when you want something that's advocated in that document, it has the same state and standing as the entire comprehensive plan. And then we did the same thing for transportation, because you have multiple transportation plans or engineering design standards for streets and those kind of things. And we just want to make sure it's absolutely clear, especially if we went to court or something else, that you value these documents as if they're incorporated in your comprehensive plan with the same standing under Chapter 160D. So then we move to a chapter called Supporting Infrastructure. And again, if you remember, growth framework creates the demand. We didn't want to leave you with a lot of demand without a solution or strategy for how to serve that moving forward. So we did do a likely impacts analysis on the map that is there, and we kind of quantified how much of what and where development might occur. And then we took that information and created a priority investment areas map. And this kind of comes off of your item previous with the budget, is that there's only so much money to spend, and let's make sure that where we're spending it, it's reinforcing outcomes, at least from the comprehensive plan standpoint, that you're trying to achieve. And so we go through here and create a tier, and these tiers talk about whether the town should really take the lead in coordinating or investing dollars, or whether the town should be supportive but have private investment do it, or maybe whether the town should maybe ask for restraint on some of the development going on or infrastructure being provided in these areas, because it's just not the wisest spend of the dollar right now. So for each of those, we have a definition, and that definition could be something you could use when you're deciding if you want to extend infrastructure or upsize infrastructure or say no to expansion of a service area. And then we conclude the document with an implementation chapter. We do have an implementation matrix now. This is the format that you see it in right now. It's still in Microsoft Excel. Honestly, because of all the changes that could occur as this document goes through the formal process, we leave it in this form until the very end, and then we'll bring it into the document in a desktop format. So I just wanted to leave you with, again, through the consultant's eyes, some of the key findings and recommendations that I feel are important in this plan, you know, as you have your discussion and the like. So the first one was just a wholesale buy-in to leading with character in everything the town does moving forward. So as you're thinking about investments, development applications, policies, it's like, is this creating the place that we want Garner to be? And we've got some statements on that that'll help you do some of your evaluation or measuring against the statement. I also just felt it was important to expand and connect open space in terms of a concept. And so now I'm hoping that you'll think, like even in the top right corner where you see an industrial property, there still may be a reason to have a little open space in that industrial property. The way this concept was drawn on the top right is if you have breweries or test kitchens or things like that who come to town, a little green space allows them to flood out into the open area and actually create a place and some energy and activity. So, or, you know, next time you have a development come in and you want to talk about centralized green spaces, well, again, talk about how that all fits within the larger system, and the plan makes recommendations on that. And so then Councilman Dellinger just goes back into what we were just talking about a little bit, is recognizing the complexities of mixed-use development. Mixed-use development is not easy, especially if it's redevelopment or infill development. And I told you my nemesis is parcel size and shapes. That's my biggest one. And then the ownership of those parcels when I want to have a larger center put together. And so that's something to have to figure out. But even as you see here in this imagery, the buildings that are actually in white are all residential, but yet the other buildings are non-residential. And so you can still have a very healthy and thriving activity center when they're not stacked all the time. But you have to get to a critical density or intensity, which starts to get me into some of these things. One of the ways to create additional wealth or just value for a community is in how it's designed. And so whether this is public investments you all make, whether it's, you know, the park or something else, or think of the most efficient way for you to create place is when the development application's in front of you, to make sure that that open space network creates something to be proud of. Where is the stormwater management? All that kind of stuff creates value. And that value will either create increased tax revenue for you because the value of the land has gone up, as was talked about before, or it'll create increased value for the developer, who then can sell that lot or rent that building a little bit higher because of the amenity nearby. And there's a lot of studies out there to prove that that's true. Then I go into what I was talking about earlier, and again, this is some of the comments we've received. There could be a disconnect to what you want to achieve from a fiscal standpoint and what you maybe define as mixed use is the example that was given before, but even other development patterns, employment centers and the like. And so on the same street right here, you may find that this is adequate for you and what you want, but maybe that same street needs to go up a little more. Maybe the street even needs to go up even higher. And there's a wonderful case study that actually is in this forthcoming cost of service study where I looked at North Hills and I studied it over time, and you looked at how the assessed value just kept increasing because they got their density to a certain number. But if you looked at the improvements going on outside and the like, it's not a tremendous amount of improvement going in compared to what's going in private. And so there's some lessons to be learned in examples like that. And then getting in here about quality design makes sense, both sense of place, but also financial sense. If you take the time to get the details right and demand that people create great places in Garner, it will improve your bottom line. It will improve your quality of life. And so we've really made a strong statement on that. That we're not just saying this because we want to be in prettier places or places that make us more excited, but there's a financial case to make for this as well. And then as I kind of mentioned, I'll close here with more of a policy initiative, but again, we think you should expand your extraterritorial jurisdiction immediately once you adopt this plan, and use this plan as your justification for it as you go forward, because you do want to have a say in what's going on at your edges as you move forward. So again, I understand that was an exhausting presentation. Only because it was the official public hearing period did I want to get everything on record. But I appreciate your patience, and I can take any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. And I believe that ultimately the council is anticipating referring this to the Planning Commission for review and recommendation, so you'll be talking to them as well, right?
That's correct.
Okay, why don't we start right here? I'll start with Ms. Behringer to see if she has questions or comments.
No, sir, not at this time.
Mr. Singleton?
Let's hope that we have the opportunity to expand ETJ. The opportunity may or may not be there. The missing middle, I appreciate you addressing that. Of course, that may be addressed also by the GA, whether we want to allow it or not.
Right.
Be interesting to see how they talk about, if they even mention setbacks, runoff because of impervious surface. We talked about it here, and as I went home, and I was like, you can double the size of a house and a lot. Where's the stormwater going to go?
Right.
How's it going to get there?
Yep.
Well, you're just going to pop it up there and just let the yard flood or let it go to your neighbor.
Yep.
So I don't know what opportunities are going to happen. I reckon we're going to have to wait another couple of months to see what kind of bills the General Assembly adopts and enforces. So hopefully we'll be able to take your recommendations here and put them into place. We'll see. But I thank you for the work and for listening to some of the feedback from us and also from the citizens, and what you've incorporated in the plan so far.
Okay, thanks, sir. Mr. Vance?
I would just say, Mr. Noonkastor, it's a tremendous amount of work done in a short period of time to bring it together. Some very good points made, which helped to, for me and my clarity in reference to the comprehensive plans, things that we need to look at as a council, really as individual council members as we go forward. Have anything further to say outside of you've done a yeoman's job so far in pulling everything together and making it, I won't say simple to read, but it's more reader friendly.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll go back to Mr. Matthews.
Great presentation, and I totally agree with those ETJs, especially that southern loop. And as I was driving through this weekend, they're really moving fast on that southern loop now, and especially on the old Stage Road area. And as soon as that's complete, we know what's going to happen. Development's going to start. So, as you told me, we need to start on it yesterday. So I hope our staff is getting ready for that ETJ expansion. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Yeah, Mr. Dellinger.
had an exciting weekend rereading the current comprehensive plan and then reading this one. In addition to what I've mentioned already on the mixed use, there were a few other things that kind of jumped out as omissions in this plan.
Okay.
One was the survey information that was in the existing plan, where there were 1,100 respondents, and it seems like the resident input isn't reflected in this in a quantitative way. And for me, coming on council 4 years ago, reading that for the first time, it sort of highlighted a direct ask or concerns from the public on what do we need to be prioritizing, at least from the residents' perspective. And I don't know if the same survey, if we still have the same survey, but I think there'd be some value in sending it out and then comparing what 5 years ago were the concerns.
Oh, benchmark it, yeah.
What are the concerns now? So you don't have to rewrite a whole survey, but at least that gives you also sort of what are the trends? Are they the same concerns? Have they changed?
Mm-hmm.
So that was kind of an idea, because there's a lot of demographic data, and that's helpful. But I don't feel like I'm hearing from the people like in a data way. The two others that kind of jumped out, and actually someone sent an email referencing this, is sort of reference to existing neighborhoods and preservation of character of those neighborhoods. And I think that's significant because there are so many older neighborhoods in Garner, and again, our hands may be not our own in the future in terms of deciding how they're developed, but I think it was always sort of a good backstop of there's value in these older communities and their structure and safety. The last one was sort of no mention of housing affordability, save sort of the missing middle element.
Right.
It comes up multiple times in the previous version, and I think as a strategic objective, we don't have a lot of influence over it, but at the same time, it's sort of fundamental to the community and having a broad swath of price points so that when we hire police, they can live here, the teachers can live here when they get hired here. And that sort of goes back to that community character piece. Again, what we can do may be limited, but if it's not even acknowledged as the fabric of the town, we don't see there's no documentation of it as being a priority for us to think about.
Yeah.
So those were the things that really jumped out as differences between the two. That and sort of moving away from density to form in terms of.
That was deliberate. Right?
Yeah, and it's a mixed bag. I think it's better. It gives you a little more flexibility, but it's very stark.
Yes, it is. It is.
When you read one back to the other, so
it is.
So I would just make the survey recommendations kind of one of the bigger ones, just because I think it.
Mm-hmm.
And there are so many new people here too. It's a new perspective potentially. So that's all I got. But good job. It's great.
No, thank you. I would welcome more comments. Sometimes I just have to bare my soul as the planner. I have a really hard time balancing the affordable housing because our hands are tied a little bit in North Carolina, but also when you are focused on form and stuff, if that townhome is $400,000 or $200,000, it's the same form, and so it requires a different approach. So I can't attack it that way. I've got to attack it with a recommendation about affordability that is decoupled from the actual form, because as people have told me who say they hate apartments, I can show you apartments that rent for a lot of money, and you would love to have, those neighbors contributing to your tax base and sales tax and so on and so forth. So, if we can hear more comments about that, I think we can add some statements to it, but I would probably stop short of trying to influence the price point of the home, short of the cost of service study that you have to lean on.
Yeah, I just know there are other municipalities that are being proactive on working with developers to
That's right.
include some affordability elements in their projects. And so I guess, again, absent even a substantive mention of it being a concern, there's no real basis for pursuing it from a policy perspective. So.
Yeah, and that's the point. I'll use that example to, whatever seeds we need to plant in a document like this, it might be zoning that picks it up, like you're saying, or some other development review process. But yeah, if the seeds aren't here, it's hard to grow that. I acknowledge that.
Okay, and I don't want to sort of nitpick this and pick out specific little statements, but I'm intrigued by the statement that sort of borrows from the plan's introduction, where it says the new document also contemplates a future where Garner is a major center of economic activity in eastern Wake County. I certainly agree with that we have that capability. I guess I was going to ask your view as to how much we need to grow that idea. Do you think we have a solid foundation now? Are we still building on that foundation to make that happen?
Yeah, I mean, I like where the compass is pointing. As an outsider, I can tell you that. I think it's very important, and we stay it in the plan to really safeguard some of those focus areas to stay non-residential or mixed use versus letting them just be a neighborhood that's easy to build right now. Because I do think that whether it's areas 5 or 6 that are going to be on NC 540 at Old Stage and NC 50 or some, you have a lot of opportunities coming to you. And the one thing Garner has above all else is wonderful geography. You're kind of in the middle of it all. You have great transportation and access. As NC 540 gets completed, RTP feels like your back door now, where, going through the 40 traffic, it feels a little longer to get there. So I think things are just going to improve. And then I also think from an economic development perspective, you're both partners and adversaries, right? At the same time as you're courting these folks. And so whatever you can do to put your best foot forward, I would continue to do that. And whether it's because an office market isn't going well in another part of the region, well, how do you capitalize on that? Or, you're doing really well in industrial right now, but, so is Holly Springs. So how do you work together on that? And, in economic development, there's kind of, without belaboring it too much, I think it's like 5 stages, if I can remember all of them. But it starts from like just having zoning in place to already having pad-ready buildings. And I think if you work up and down that scale and get the right inventory, you just keep looking for those opportunities. And when it feels like the right one, you go get it.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to take a minute and I'll go back around council if they want another shot at this to see if the manager or managers have any particular comments or observation they care to make at this time. Start with Mr. Dix.
Yeah, I would say that this plan hit on a lot of areas. I like the visuals and kind of being able to visualize what the future could be in some of the areas where it concentrates on some of the focus areas. And just has a different, I guess, feel and for the community, what the community could be than our previous plan. It's just, I think as we look around the county, we could talk about some of the things we'd like to see here in Garner. And I think, this plan puts some of those here as we look at the growth and the highway system, 540 coming, right, and what we can kind of imagine the future of Garner to be. So, that's some of the things I like about it. And Mayor, at some point, I think you were going to acknowledge also one of the comments that we got through email, potentially.
Oh, yes, yeah, yes. So, well, let me see if I can hear from our system manager, then I will mention that, sure enough. Either Jody or John, any observations, comments you care to make?
I would just add, from my perspective, I've worked on these type of plans in other communities, and I think the real strength of what we're doing here is that how it threads together our previous work and plans, and it really creates a foundation for forward thinking with giving reverence to the past and some of the vision we had. And I think for it to be a successful document, for something that it's going to live on for a number of years, that's a really important piece, and I think that this document has done that very well. So well done.
Rogers?
I just really want to thank council for being active participants in the development of the document. And we all know where we came from in doing this, and in recognizing that we all were sort of seeing the guidance documents we had slightly differently. And I think that with your active involvement, the active involvement of Planning Commission and all of the stakeholder engagements, and while they weren't enumerated the same way here, as Mr. Dellinger pointed out, there was very good engagement with stakeholders and citizens, and I think that's really helped us form something that is going to be a good basis for a plan that is much easier for us to be able to use as a guidance tool. I know Nate and I were in a meeting this morning, and we were explaining to someone just the reason for a change in format so that they could visually see some of the things that we'd really want to impart. We sent them a link to it. They've already been reviewing the document today. They weren't aware of the process. And so I do think it really does set itself up for the intentions we had when we got your approval to do this a little over a year ago. So thank you for all the input. I do want us to continue these conversations that we're having, though, in this input, because I don't want us to miss little things at the end of the document that makes any of you feel like it's not the document you want us to see. So we're all taking good notes. Jeff's nodding. Jeff and I are all taking notes, and we want to try to make sure that we can address all the things that we're hearing from you and any other input that we get from Planning Commission and citizens before we finalize this.
Yes. Okay, and I think the manager and I discussed briefly, I believe all of the council members received an email from Mr. Jeff Swain. And so he indicated that he wanted to be here to be a part of the discussion, but he couldn't be. And so he shared with us some thoughts and ideas that he had, and he wanted that to be made a part of the public record. And so I think without any opposition, that can be incorporated without any problem. Am I right on that, Mr. Attorney? Yeah. Okay. So Jeff, if you're listening, we will not read those here, but we have those for the record. Okay. All right. Any other questions, comments from the council? I think we're ready to move this to the next level, I hope. So,
Mr. Mayor, if you can just verify that there's no public comment
Yes.
from the members of the audience at this time.
okay, yes. Didn't want to forget that. Anybody here from the public who wants to comment on the information you've heard and or your own understanding of the Garner Forward Comprehensive Plan based on the document itself? Okay. All right. Scouts are probably wondering when we're going to let them go. Is that right? So, okay. All right. Hearing none, then.
I want another comment.
Go ahead.
At one of our meetings we had upstairs in the training room, I believe it was the council and the planning commission, you raised some points about different, how Garner could be, the current UDO here. And you raised that point of, do you want everything to be neighborhood, little development neighborhood, everything's the same height, everything's this and that? Or would you prefer some areas that should be really intense to try to gain more green space in other places? And that one has stayed with me the whole time, because I think, and I read some of the comments people have written and said, oh, we shouldn't see 10-story buildings in Garner. Why not? You've got a major interstate highway here. We're getting ready to have another subset of an interstate highway with 540 coming. If the bus rapid transit system happens from Raleigh and comes to North South Station, that may be the first pocket, because that's going to have to change. Or I'll rephrase that. That should change to redevelop. And some of those buildings there may be 4 or 5 stories or 8 or 10 stories. I don't know. Depends on what wants to come there. I read a report today about office buildings and how there's millions and millions and millions of square feet not being leased, and that's going to have to be evaluated nationwide. As that work environment is changing and changing rapidly. So that is one of the best, your comments, and we talked about it when we were up in the training room, one of the best insights I've thought about with this, because you can trade off more dense areas for more green areas. Yeah. Instead of having a little here, little here, little here, little here, is that what we really want? And I think that's one of the more important things that we've learned, I've learned in this process, is how we look at some of these, particularly some of these residential projects that come in and they're all single story and they're taking up a lot of acreage, and you sit there and think, is that really what we should do? Right. You know, and so anyway, I appreciate that insight that you offered to us, because I think I'm not the only one who's thought about that. I'm sure their citizens are too. And again, some may object. I'm not talking about putting a 10-story building across the street over here in the Forest Hill subdivision. That's not appropriate.
Right.
But at some of these major connections, a large, tall-story, large buildings would be appropriate. I mean, if you go up Highway 70 without catching a stoplight in 5 minutes, you're surrounded by them.
Yeah.
And they're going to be coming this way. So I thank you for your insight on that.
No, that's great. And to your point, the whole reason the development change and intensity map was included was to try to put people at ease that we're not recommending this everywhere, but very strategic and specific locations only. Yeah.
Okay, was there any other final, okay?
Thank you.
You've handed it over to the council now for our next move, right?
Yes.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I've read most of it. There are portions of it I still have to read, but there's a lot of stuff in there for sure.
Yep.
Council, seems reasonable to me to consider the action that is mentioned here and to let the planning commission review this, and it'll come back to us after that. So are you ready to take that step?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion made properly. If you're in favor of the motion, would you vote aye?
Aye.
If you're opposed to the motion, vote no. Okay. So let's see, we don't know exactly what the time frame will be in terms of it going there and then coming back here. Is that right? Or
Let Jeff update us on the schedule.
Jeff.
As of right now, Mr. Mayor, council members, the tentative schedule would have this at the Planning Commission in June. If they would need more time, of course, to review, we would carry that into July. So the earliest that this would come back would potentially be at your one meeting that you have in July.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Treesberg. Okay, I'm going to suggest that maybe we take a short recess at this time and come back and finish the agenda then. Anybody have an objection to that? Don't see any, so why don't we take at least a 10-minute, maybe 15-minute recess and refresh a little bit, and we'll come back and delve into the new and old business items. So I declare us in recess at this time. Session after recess, and we'll go to the first item under new and old business, and I'll recognize our Finance Director, Mr. David Beck, for his presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening to you all. The first item we have for you this evening is a resolution that authorizes the issuance of $21.62 million in general obligation bonds. This is part of the referendum from 2021 that voters approved. And this is the first installment sale. The sale is slated for May 31st, and then we would close on the transaction about 3 weeks following that. So this is the final action council will need to take to proceed forward with that bond sale.
Okay, thanks, sir. Council, any questions for Mr. Beck in regards to this matter? This is an anticipated action, so I think a motion would be in order to adopt the resolution 2023-35, I believe it is. Looks
I
like.
move we approve resolution providing for the issuance of not to exceed $21,620,000 of general obligation public improvement bonds, Series 2023.
Second.
Okay, motion properly made and seconded. Any questions, comments? Hearing none, if you're in favor of the motion, would you vote aye?
Aye.
Any opposition? There is none. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Beck, next item.
Next item is our contract to audit fiscal year 2023. We propose to use the same audit firm again, Malden and Jenkins. If you recall, a couple years ago, they gave us a price quote for a 5-year option, essentially, to lock in their prices. This upcoming audit would be year 3 of that price guarantee. We do have an additional cost this year due to the ARP money because of the amount of that has to be audited a little more intensely, and there's an additional cost for that. So they'll perform those services this year, which does raise the price a little bit, but it's $40,500 total for the audit for fiscal year 23, and we would ask that council considers approving that contract as presented.
Okay. Council, any questions on this issue for Mr. Beck? Okay, hearing none, the motion's in order. Don't all speak
So
at the same
moved.
time.
So moved.
Okay, thank you. Great. Okay, motion properly before you. If you approve the motion, would you vote aye?
Aye.
And opposition, no. There is none. Okay, Mr. Beck, thank you very much. Committee reports, I'm not aware of any, but there may be some.
Yes,
Okay.
we do have a committee report from the HR committee. I'd just like to say that we have started the process of interviewing for the various advisory boards and committees, and we would like to bring before you 3 appointees to the Veterans Committee for a term of 3 years. Those individuals are Mr. Tim Stevens, Mr. Robert Gregory, and Mr. Jeff Hicks. We know that we have Memorial Day coming up, and Mr. Matthews has been working diligently for a program there, and we'd like for these individuals to receive your consideration for approval on this evening.
So you're bringing some others, but you want to go ahead and have council approve these tonight, is that right?
Exactly. Yes.
Okay. And I guess since we've approved some of our procedural changes, I'm trying to remember, Mr. Attorney, if we should open the floor if there are other nominations that council wants to make at this time, or?
No, what you adopted tonight, which is
Okay.
kind of going into effect later, but it's not a change. You have the HR committee serving as the nominating committee, and you can vote on the entire slate.
Okay. All right. So you recommended the 3 that you mentioned, okay?
Yes, sir.
All right, and you make that in form of a motion, I'm sure. So is
So
there a
moved.
second? Okay, motion properly made and seconded. Any questions about these? Most of you know these individuals, I think, for sure. If you're in favor of the motion, would you please vote aye?
Aye.
If you oppose, no, and there is no opposition. Okay, thank you, HR Committee. Any other committee reports to come before us this evening? Okay, hearing none, I recognize our manager for manager reports.
Thank you, Mayor, Town Council. I'm going to turn the first item over to Assistant Manager Miller, and she will give you an update on the Talk of the Town report.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, members of council. Just to briefly provide some highlights for your May report of Talk of the Town. Our first item looks at some data and statistics provided by our Public Works Department for our 2023 spring cleanup. We had about 110 loads of yard waste that were collected, 62 loads of trash, 9 mattresses, 877 staff hours went into the cleanup this spring, and they worked 14 days. So just wanted to share that information with you. It's always an important service that's provided in the spring and fall, and as you can see, it provides quite a dent in our appearance and beautification efforts here in town. So we're excited to continue that event and share that data with you this evening. A few other items I wanted to highlight this evening. One looks at potholes, and this is the time of year where we have lots of potholes coming from the winter months into the spring months. I'm happy to report that we have gotten some response and feedback from Timber Crossing Shopping Center, and my understanding is that they have filled or patched the current potholes. So we've come a long way in trying to address that situation. Now, they have also indicated this is a temporary solution, that they'll be working on a long-term solution, looking at redoing the entire parking lot area as well, and they're targeting the summer for doing that. So we're excited to hear that. Really, this came about from Manager Dickerson writing them a letter indicating that this is something that we were getting complaints about and needed to address. So just wanted to bring that to your attention. Very excited about that.
Thank you. Go ahead, carry on.
We also have a few areas where we had some tall grass concerns, and just wanted to report back to council that we've addressed those areas on Penny Street and West Garner Road, as well as East Garner Road near Jones Sausage Road. So it is spring, and as you'll see looking at the next page for the Garner info apps, one of the areas this time of year that we tend to get more concerns and complaints about is tall grass and weeds on private property. So since April 11th, we've had 44 complaints entered into the app. The top one being tall grass and weeds, as I mentioned, because it is just that time of year. Of the items that were submitted, 96% have been completed or in progress. And our inspections and public work teams have been responding to these items, that they've been very busy with, they're responding to 80% of those items as well. The final item, and this is a new item that's been added to your monthly report, looks at the quarterly development statistics, and I'm going to turn that over to Assistant Manager Hodges to explain that as we talk about this as a new addition to your monthly reports.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. Council, we have talked about providing some regular updates on development in the past. We had presented one report to you to get some feedback on. Our plan was to take that and present that to you on a quarterly basis. So what you have here is the quarterly statistics for the first calendar quarter of the year, and we've presented this in several ways. One of them is the COs that are issued. I will mention that multifamily units, as some of you may know, those COs are issued on a building basis, but Mr. Paget and his staff are converting those to the number of units that includes, so that you get a better indication of the residential units. So it's not 200 COs, particularly for those of you who knows how that works. That is a conversion that's being made so that you see the impact on numbers of users and residents in the town. We've also presented the trends for the monthly COs. And then on the second page, total cost of new residential construction by the CO date. One thing that I will mention there is that we do base our permits on a value range that the builders are assigning when they apply for their permit. So there's some good faith effort in them keeping that into a reasonable range there. And so these are based on those numbers. This is not anything that is based on some tax valuation or some estimate of tax valuation, but it's on the stated value that the builder puts on it when they apply for their permit. So again, it is a piece of data. It is not the only piece of data I would suggest that we need for all of our decision making, but it does especially help you establish and see trends that are happening with our type of development. And then we further break down inspections on the last chart by quarter by trade. And so that's trades within our traditional building inspections department, but it's then also adding the things that planning and engineering are out inspecting. And it may be obvious to some, but not to others, that in addition to our inspections staff being out in the field every day doing inspections, so are our planning staff who are having to do inspections for various parts of the development ordinance requirements before COs are issued. Likewise, engineering is doing those as well. So we wanted to include that here because they are field inspections that all relate back into the overall workload that we have and what's going on. So we'll be happy to try to answer any questions you have tonight and also receive any feedback you have on the information that's being presented. Our plan, again, is to include this the month after the quarter ends. We were one more month delayed in getting that this time just because of working with the new format and getting that data for you. But our plan will be to present this in the Talk of the Town in the month following the quarter end.
Okay, Council, any questions in regards to the information shared by Mr. Hodges and Ms. Miller?
Driving around now and you see these apartments coming, they're going to be online in the next few months, and so it is very helpful. It's a good change to put the units and combine them that way. I know it was a challenge to do, but it definitely helps shape the vision of the data. So thank y'all for that.
Thanks to Mr. Pageant, who's here tonight, who's instrumental in helping us track and keep this data all prepared for presentation.
All right, thank you. Was that it as relates to Talk of the Town? No.
Those are all the updates. Certainly, if there are any additional questions the council has, we're here to answer them.
Okay, are there any at this point? Okay, down here. All right. Clear for now. All right, Mr. Manager, are you going to continue the rest of this, or?
Yes, I will.
Okay.
And I have some things to add to it. Mentioned the next downtown night market is Thursday, May 18th. So just coming up in a couple of days from 5 to 9 on Main Street. Lake Benson Boathouse will open for the season on Friday, May 19th. And we'll have, I guess, John Boat and kayak rentals at that time. You can check the GarnerNC.gov website if you want to know the times and things like that, when it's open and some of the fees and associated with that. Garner's Memorial Day observance will be Monday, May 29th at 9:30 at the Garner Veterans Memorial at Lake Benson Park. So we'll have ceremonies surrounding that. Just also want to mention that we will have an announcement from Wake Med at the end of the week pertaining to some of their plans here in Garner. Also wanted to mention that the town received its credit rating, and Moody's reaffirmed our AA1 rating, and some of the factors were our strong growth in economic base. Our financial position remains very strong, and that we also had long-term liability profile that is manageable, although they did recognize that we will be putting additional debt in the near future. So a lot of good things there that will help us as we go out to the bond market. S&P, Standard & Poor's, is evaluating our information now, and we should be receiving some type of report on that shortly. So, and I think that's all I have. The parking lot's been mentioned. So with that, that's it for me.
Questions for the manager? Anybody? No?
And I would mention that I will send that Moody's report out to you via email.
Okay.
If you want to take a look at that.
All right. I know we have a closed session scheduled. Let me see. I guess we didn't tuck the council reports in. Maybe, council, would you rather do those before we go into closed session? Maybe. I'll start with Mr. Matthews. Okay, Mr. Singleton.
Yes, our last meeting, I believe on May the 2nd, we had a project come before us for Highway 401. It was delayed, and we had got a letter from Mr. Penny
Yes.
And I'd asked, it'd been to some of us, I'd asked staff to send it to everyone else. I just wanted to see if that had taken place. The copies of the information was sent to Mr. Triesenberg, the mayor, and to me. And I'd asked that everyone else, if they would send that to everyone else because of his concerns about some stormwater runoff that'd be coming to his property. So I just want to make sure that everyone has gotten that.
Possibly not. We'll
I
look
don't know
back
that
into
we
that.
did. We'll make sure that gets sent to council
We may not have
tomorrow.
done that.
Please send that. I appreciate, it's information because of, we're going to be discussing this. It's some great stormwater issues and he feels it's, I think he has a legitimate complaint.
I think I misread your email to say you were sending it to the rest of the council. So I apologize. We'll get that sent out to everyone.
Because I don't believe any of the staff received the email, as far as I know. It looked like it just went to you and me and,
And Jeff.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, Jeff.
We'll
So,
get that to you
Yeah, we
tomorrow.
can get a copy.
yeah. We'll let you know. He's an elderly gentleman, and he said he wasn't going to be able to appear here in person, and he wanted us to be aware of that. Okay, let's see. That's council report. Mr. Page. Okay, Mr. Dellinger. Mr. Vance.
I would just like to say that this month, May, is Stroke Awareness Month. And stroke is the 5th leading cause of death in the country. And it is the leading cause of disabilities in the country. And there's an acronym that's used to help to assist individuals who may not be trained in identifying individuals with a stroke. It's called B FAST. And that is B is for balance. The person's having balancing problems. The E stands for the eyes. The person's having a problem with blurry vision. The face, the person drooping or changed in their demeanor in their face. The arms, you ask the person if they can raise their arms up. And speech, the S is speech, and the speech is slurred. And time is critical. The quicker those items are identified, the quicker the individual can be treated for stroke.
Make sure.
Just
And that
wanna
nice
make you aware of that.
lapel item
Yes.
reflects that, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah, very good.
The red ribbon.
All right.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I believe we covered all council reports. Anything else before we go into closed session? I think that's all on our agenda. So need a motion to go into closed session. You see the site there.
I move we go into our closed session pursuant to NC General Statutes 143.318.11, subset A, subset 3, to consult with the town attorney regarding litigation.
Okay, motion properly made and seconded. If you're in favor of the motion, please vote aye. Aye. If there's any opposition, no, and there is none. So as soon as we get squared away with our audio and video, suggestion we retire to the closed session
Yes.
room.
My request, due to the sensitivity of one of the items to be discussed, that we go into your conference room, and it's probably a best practice that we should do to make sure that, things are not inadvertently streamed or shared on Teams or viewable to the public.
Sure. Okay. So moving forward, we would expect to do that. We good? Okay, thank you. Okay, I declare that the Garner Town Council is back in open session, having gone into closed session to consult with our town attorney regarding litigation matter. The matter was heard by the council, and council gave direction to the attorney in regards to proceeding on the matter. And that was the only matter dealt with at the time. Since we have now completed our agenda for this evening, unless there's something that I'm not aware of, I'm going to declare an adjournment.
May I ask a
Everybody?
quick question?
Yep.
We talked last week at the budget work session that we may have time to discuss any additional budget items at the work session 2 weeks from tonight, the 30th. Is that still going to be in the agenda if we want to?
Yes, so we'll have an agenda item just to provide any updates to council. And this evening, we also showed what a 2% pay adjustment would also look like as well. So we'll present additional information. Our goal will be then to get final guidance from council at that meeting as to what you would like to see in the budget ordinance that we'll bring forth for the June 6th meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other question? Okay, motion's in order to adjourn.
Second.
All right, all in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
And it is so ordered.